In the early morning hours of November 11th, 1918, the last signature was scratched on paper, ending the fighting between Allied forces and the Central Powers in what was called the Great War. After 4 years of fighting, over 20 million people lay dead. But at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, a ceasefire took effect and the world celebrated. The war to end all wars had ended. From its beginning, there was a realization that this was a new kind of warfare. It was a mechanized war, an industrial war, and the casualty numbers were staggering. After 4 years of fighting, the world struggled with the enormity of what had taken place. Small memorials in family homes and town squares were created as the war pressed on, but after the armistice, the call for more permanent monuments was immediate. During the interwar period between the two world wars, thousands of war memorials were erected throughout Europe, parts of Asia, and Australia. Although the United States was involved in just the last year and a half of the conflict, over 4 million Americans had served, and 116,516 died. America, too, would honor their sacrifice. As a later historian related, the horrors of the Great War were entombed in monuments. Memory was cloaked in remembrance. Just 1 week after President Woodrow Wilson went before Congress to request a declaration of war against Germany, a mass meeting was held by the Girls' Welfare Association of Middletown, Ohio, calling for the women of the community to organize for war work. The Girls' Welfare Association was founded in 1914 by Sarah Verity, to raise funds for needy individuals and to give personal hours of service wherever needed. Under the National Surgical Dressings Committee, Middletown women sprang into action, preparing boxes of dressings for shipment overseas. Their work continued throughout the war and ceased on January 6, 1919. On Saturday, May 3, 1919, Middletown staged a welcome home parade to honor all its returning servicemen and celebrate the return of the Armco Ambulance Corps, its most highly decorated unit. Looking for a more permanent tribute to Middletown's Great War veterans, once again the Girls' Welfare Association took action. The campaign began on September 12, 1919, and quickly raised $2,200. The next April, the Civic Fund contributed an additional $3,500, and the Road of Remembrance Memorial Project began. The concept of the Road of Remembrance involved the planting of 1,100 trees, one for each Middletonian who served in the war. The sycamore trees, planted 50 feet apart, would line both sides of South Main Street, then part of Dixie Highway, from Michigan Boulevard, now 14th Avenue, to the crest of the hill at Elliott's Farm, nearly 2 miles. At both entrances, large sandstone monuments would be placed, each with a bronze plaque bearing the names of the 24 men who made the supreme sacrifice. Plaques bearing the names of all who served would be added later. Once funding was secured, the Fisk Brothers Company in Cincinnati, Ohio, was contracted to create the monuments. On Labor Day, September the 6th, 1920, the rows of trees planted and the monuments placed, the Road of Remembrance was dedicated. Members of the newly formed American Legion assembled at the high school and, headed by Nate Coonan's band, marched west on 3rd Street to Main Street and then south to the entrance of the road, where a large crowd of citizens had gathered. On the speaker's stand were members of the Girls' Welfare Association, American Legion color bearers, and the speakers for the occasion. After the singing of America, Paul J. Banker introduced Bennett Chappell, Director of Publicity for the American Rolling Mill Company, ARMCO, who gave a brief address. Now we are gathered at this sunlit spot by the side of the road to pay homage to the boys of this great World War. Next, Mrs. Charles R. Hook, wife of ARMCO's Vice President and General Manager, and Chair of the Monument Committee, presented the American Legion with a silk flag, which was accepted by Commander E. H. Yetter. The Star-Spangled Banner was sung, and the ceremonies concluded. The uniqueness of the memorial was recognized by the American Forestry Association as the first Road of Remembrance in the country. The post-war decade of the 1950s ushered in significant changes to the American cultural landscape. A population shift from central urban areas to the suburbs facilitated an increased demand for automobiles, which in turn led to the construction of better roads. Census figures for Butler County from 1950 to 1960 reflected a 35% increase in population. The earliest map of Butler County in 1836 shows a road closely following the Great Miami River. It was identified as the Hamilton-Middletown Pike. Over 100 years later, this road, now State Route 4, was still the major two-lane highway connecting the two largest cities in Butler County. In 1954, the state of Ohio announced a plan to acquire property along State Route 4 for the purpose of widening the highway to 4 lanes. The project began in 1956, and at its completion, added 4.2 miles connecting Verity Parkway to the terminus of Route 63, and adding the additional 2 lanes all the way to Hamilton. Because of the road construction, the 2 Road of Remembrance monuments on the south end were moved to a new location on Route 4. In 1977, the 2 monuments at 14th Avenue were moved to the American Legion building on South Main Street. For over 50 years, the Road of Remembrance monuments stood in their respective locations, largely forgotten for their original purpose. While 2 still stand proudly framing the entrance to the American Legion building, their companions on Route 4 remained in locations not easily accessible to the public. In 2020, the decision was made to move the 2 on Route 4 to the military section of Woodside Cemetery in Arboretum. Through a grant obtained by the Middletown Historical Society, the process began on November the 20th, 2020. 100 years after the Road of Remembrance was first dedicated, we pause again to honor the brave Middletonians who served their country in what was at the time the world's most devastating military conflict. At its end, questions arose regarding what the Great War meant and how it should be remembered. Those questions are still debated today. Much has been written about war and memorialization, but perhaps this quote from a Gulf War veteran has the most lasting meaning. Peace is the only adequate war memorial. Aaron Toole, U.S. Marine Corps.